So how you been doing? You been writing a lot?
Well, I'll tell you what. Actually, I, over the past few years, wasn't doing a lot of journalism. I wrote a few books, instructional books, and I was doing a lot of real estate work.
Oh, good.
But all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, my dream job at Guitar.com came back to me after 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So I'm very excited.
Very cool.
Be back doing this kind of thing and talking to guitar players and going to shows and shooting videos and all that.
That's great.
So, yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, you're very good at it, so.
Thank you.
It suits you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So tell me what you've been up to. I've got Birds Above Guitarland here and Even Things Up, the last couple discs.
Yep. Well, it's been a while since we spoke, but I left Dwight in '02, parted ways, and I still have my label Little Dog for whatever a record label's worth, but I had my label. I had a little unfinished business to take care of. I finished a record that was all instrumental called Daredevil, and then I had a guy on my label that was really interesting, and his name was Moot Davis, and it was country. It was sort of like Webb Pierce country, like late 50s, Hank Sr. It wasn't Telecaster country. It was more like, P90, Scotty Moore acoustic electric style stuff. And I did a record with him, and then I was in his band, and I really liked the music, and everything about it was great. And I said, I'm going to try to really pick this up and make this into something. And we went from, we went for about 3.5 years. Made two records actually. First one was both of them were really good, but the second one, we made the second record, and he just fell apart, disappeared, just was like couldn't take the road. We did 200 shows in like a year and a half. Went to Japan, went to Europe twice. We were hitting it really hard, getting on the radar, and he just fell off. And in the process of that, I started to change things because the Telecaster, it wasn't Bakersfield country, and so in working with Dwight, I went from triads in the case of Dwight to tetrachords. So if I'm playing Western swing, rockabilly-ish, Webb Pierce-ish stuff, there's sixes and nines and diminished, and and I was, we were revving it up. So there was some stuff going on, like country jazzy things, and I started exploring a new guitar because the Tele didn't work for me for that particular sound. So I kind of got on a trek of finding a guitar, and the only guitar I had in my arsenal was an Epiphone Joe Pass that I had gotten from them, a Korean thing. And it was, it was a nice guitar, but it had its flaws. It had a plastic finish on it, and this and that. And so during the time of playing with him, I sort of took this guitar and morphed it into something I could use. I put my frets on it. I put a Bixby on it. I put P90s on it. I just kind of really redid the guitar as much as I could. Couldn't get around the finish and the lack of sustain. The guitar had, I would be want to say, the guitar had about as much sustain as a set of car keys. I mean, it was just like playing clothesline wire. But that fell apart in '06, and I told my wife, who was a recording engineer, and we had our studio in the building we'd been leasing for like 9 years over in Burbank, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to be in anybody's band ever again. I don't want to be a sideman. I don't want to play behind somebody. I don't want to look for a gig like that. And I want to play, and I want to be able to play whenever I want to. If somebody calls me for a gig or I want to go out and play, and I didn't want to just have to do last-minute things and do a pickup band. So I sort of recommitted, to say, you know what, for the first time in my career, I'm going to just commit to being a guitar player and work on my career as a guitarist and let the production be secondary. Instead of being a producer who plays guitar, I wanted to be a guitar player who produces records on the side, more or less. I moved the studio to my house. I've got a 2-car, well, more like a 4-car garage that I built a beautiful studio in. Very nice. Been here like 4.5 years. Made some really great records here. And I brought my overhead down so that I could make low-budget records because that's all that's left. And I came here and I just concentrated. I made Even Things Up with my buddy Mike Murphy, and we ended up with like an organ trio where he played organ and bass, and I had a good drummer and myself, and I just started working a little place called the Moose Lodge, which is literally a moose lodge, like an elk. It's a Columbus-type place. And I started working there, and just to get my legs under me, because I hadn't fronted a band in a long time. I did 2 tours with Dwight, one on my own in 95 and 97, but it was really in the middle of Dwight's career that, we were concentrating on that. And I just started my track on, playing, and I did Even Things Up, and I did, quite a bit of touring behind it for 2.5 years. Released it on my label, then took it back after 6 months because Little Dog was much more of an Americana label, and I didn't know the blues world. And then I released it with Viztone as an imprint through this guy Viztone, Richard Rosenblatt out of Boston, and got a lot of action with it and a lot of notoriety, and had a song go to number 2 on the chart on B.B. King Bluesville XM satellite radio. I got number 2 on his chart, and just everything was really cool. And came time, I got to make a second record. I worked really hard on my vocals. The second record, I had a much better view of, I've been concentrating on my singing and working on how important the keys were, because I wasn't really singing in the right keys. And I had a lady that was giving me singing lessons, more like just stretching my voice and, that type of thing. And she kept telling me, you're a baritone. I had a good range, but that doesn't mean that you sound good everywhere in your range. And so I started singing lower in my range, and it felt right to me. So I was like, got locked in on the keys, and then worked really hard, made Birds Above Guitarland. That came out September 17th. Did a tour last year, pretty much hit the United States, and did Toronto and did Vancouver as well. And then here I am talking to you, Did a lot of other things with guitars. That guitar that I made, I ended up doing a signature model with Reverend. They pretty much did whatever I asked, and they turned it into this one called the PA1, which is it's got a piece of wood down the middle, but very, very narrow, like a little L shape where the bridge is pinned, and that comes with P90s and a Bigsby, my frets, my neck angle, my headstock angle. Very playable guitar. And then I did a Tele body with them called the East Sider, which we've been selling. And I've been just concentrating on being a guitar player, getting my endorsement stuff together, getting my signature guitars together, working on a signature acoustic guitar line, working with a guy to start designing an amplifier, just stuff like that that I would have been doing if I'd have been just doing this all along. And I'm just having the time of my life, because everything I did was about playing guitar. Producing records, going on, everything was about playing guitar. It didn't matter. The end result was, do I get to play guitar? Okay, good. I like to do that. I mean, I've produced records for guitar players where I didn't play, and that was fine with me, but I just want to play the guitar. It's as simple as I can tell you is I want to play my guitar in front of people. Everything I have to do to make that happen is just what happens.
Yep, I understand that. So does that mean to say that you're not doing as much with producing or with Little Dog at this point?
Well, Little Dog is really just there's no reason to sign anybody to Little Dog. I put my record out on Little Dog because there is some of an imprint there, but there's no reason to sign anybody for me, because back in the day, my real equity was I owned the masters, and I could maybe somehow down the line really recoup with some usage of the master, but the reality was it was a break even. I could sell enough records with mom and pop stores who were my pals back in the day if I could push out 5 or 6 or 7,000, which was a lot, and you know that in the indie world. But I could break even and say, okay, I recouped the cost of making my record, and I own the master, and I'm going to try to get lucky with licensing on something or see what happens. But that's just not plausible now, because there's no mom and pop stores, and there's no hard CDs. It's all downloads, and it just doesn't make sense for me to put my hand in your pocket from bandstand sales, because that's where everybody makes their money, instead of the artist being able to sell a CD for manufacturing cost off the bandstand, which is $1.20, and they get 15 or 20 for it. They're going to have to pay me $6 or $7 and then sell it for 15. So It's just a hard way to make it go. And it's, I mean, almost every artist I signed, no matter how many good intentions I had better intentions for them than they had for me. So, it ends up an ass whipping, at some point. Everybody just kind of, not that everybody does, but it becomes a real tough road. Without them having any real skin in the game, they don't look at it any other different than, I did this, it didn't happen. Okay, I don't want to do it anymore. So I just got tired of that attitude. So it's really just catalog. Little Dog is catalog, and that's how I look at it and put my records out on Little Dog. Producing records, I've got a really nice, the best studio I've had. I master here. It's flat. The room sounds great. I got a good drum room, a vocal booth, everything I need to make records. My wife's an engineer. Tony Rambo's my other engineer, has been with me 12 years. I mean, we've got a crew here that's been together for a long time. We make great records, with Pro Tools and what I know and what my engineers know. Making a great record is not a problem. It's just, it's almost all self-funded records where somebody comes in and goes, hey, I want to make a record. I need to make a record, and they come here and I offer them kind of a place to do it,
Right.
There's nothing left, really, of the business. I mean, if you look at the majority of the records being made, records that you and I liked or bought growing up, nobody's making those records. Major record companies aren't really funding that kind of stuff. It's all American Idol. It's all big pop, young kids, hip-hop, R&B, and kids bands. That singer-songwriter stuff. Nashville's not going to really have me make records, which is okay. I never made records there, so that would have been one refuge that I wasn't looking for that, but I don't make records like anybody in Nashville now, so I barely did back with Dwight, so there's not a lot of avenues open for what I do, which was a songwriter producer. So it's just whoever comes through the door, and there's still people want to make records, but the budgets are just devastated, A really super high budgeted record now is $40,000.
Wow.
And at my place, $40,000 will get you a record that sounds like 150 or 60. But that's because of my experience,
Yeah. So I was going to ask you some things about like the Americana scene, the blues scene. Where do you fit in right now? What do you see?
I made my record when I decided really to concentrate on having a career as a guitarist. I sat down and just looked over what I like to do, what I was doing. I could sing country music and I can write country songs, but there's a lid on the country world in that you're never going to advance much further than just playing little honky tonks and I like the Americana scene. The Americana scene really it's an interesting flip that it's taken, which I'll address in a moment. But that said, breaking through that ceiling that major country still owns that marketplace. And I saw that with the artists that I had, Moot Davis, that, we were doing gangbusters. The records sounded great, everything about them, but we weren't going to get much past occasionally getting a festival for like $2,500. It wasn't going to go back. We weren't going to be in a bus and doing $500 or $7,500 a night. That was not going to happen. And we weren't going to ever get on country radio. So I, as a guitar player, truly fall on the blue side of the page, left to my own devices. If I take everything I know about playing guitar, when oddly enough I'm flattered with the success that I had with Dwight and what people thought about me as a guitar player with Dwight, and I'm very proud of what I played. But that said, I was really playing like, about 40% of my palette. There was 60% of what I could do on the guitar was left off the table because it wasn't appropriate for his music. I didn't play any slide stuff because that was a little bit, but not really, and nothing with a tetrachord, nothing with a 4-note chord. So I was limited to, Bakersfield style and whatever I could do with that. Very major sounding stuff and occasionally dominant sounding stuff. And I know I did some pretty radical shit, But that said, you know, there was a whole bunch of stuff left off the table that just wasn't right. I played Dwight music. I customized my style for Dwight's career and his songs. I played appropriately for him. I didn't play for me. And that was a challenge, you know, that any great guitar player that I've ever followed accepted and took, you know, where they would take whatever they had and tailor it to the song they were playing or to the artist. Sometimes it was a comfortable fit. You know, Albert Lee could play with Emmylou, and he fit perfectly because he did exactly, he had this thing that he did, you know, better than anybody, and she would say, she'd push that button every once in a while and go, train beat, Albert Lee, and it was, wow, that's great. So he didn't have to compromise what he did, but in my case, I had a lot of other stuff going on musically that I needed to explore. So I fell on the blues side of the page. I write on the blues side of the page, left to my own devices, and I was working as a singer, and I figured I would be singing much more on the blues side of the page. So in doing that, I figured, well, I'll go into this thing under the banner of the blues world, because I sort of looked it up online. Coco Montoya is a friend of mine, and I spoke to him. Johnny A. is a friend of mine, and I spoke to him just kind of about their careers and what was going on and how it worked out there, and kind of got a lay of the land. And I thought that would kind of be my best way to reintroduce myself, my album, and what I'm trying to do. The blues world's a little cliquey. I could not get a booking agent. It did not matter what I said, who I called. I had one agent who, Rick Booth, nice guy, talked to me at Intrepid. He had a couple of guys on his label that wanted to take guitar lessons from me. They admired my playing, and they told him, Rick, you should book this guy. It's Pete Anderson. And he was like, man, I don't know much about Dwight Yoakam, and I don't know who you are. And I'm kind of like, well, I'm not discouraged by that, but let me tell you this. I worked for a guy who I produced and arranged who sold, you know, above 20 million records. We toured the world, you know, for 18 years, and I've been on The Tonight Show 19 times. Can you market that? Can you just use that whether you like it or not, or know what it is? Does those credentials help you in any way getting me gigs? And I just couldn't break through to anybody, you know, and so I was like, well, I started doing it myself, and then Kevin, who works with me here, started booking me. We started doing it that way, and it's a tough road, but I thought it was going to be different, and it wasn't at all. It was very cliquey, very much compartmentalized in how they do it. Joined the Blues Society, went to Memphis, hung out, you know, really made one friend there, which was Bill Wax, who was the guy that was the head of B.B. King Bluesville on Sirius XM Radio. And Bill and Bill got exactly who I was and what I was doing. He goes, man, this record's great. You'd help us with the blues world, because he was all about helping it. And other than that, I just was like, oh, you're a new guy. Yeah, I sort of heard of you. And I was like, well, I can't live with that. That's not going to work for me. So I didn't abandon it per se. Second record, I knew that I was coming out with this record, and I was going to make a blue-ish record. But it was like, you know what? I'm going to broaden this Pete Anderson guitar player, not a blues album. It's just Pete Anderson guitar player. And I'm more on that trek, you know, of doing that. And, you know, I hate to say leaning back towards Americana, because I think my earlier records were definitely Americana records. And, you know, truth be told, you know, Rosie Flores and Dwight Yoakam way back, and Jim Lauderdale that I made records with in the 80s, they were the first Americana records ever, because they were American music records that didn't fit anywhere. There wasn't an Americana format back then. Now, the cool thing that's happened with Americana, very interesting. First of all, the guy that runs it is very hip. I really like the new guy that's running the Americana Association. I think he's from Brooklyn. And he really gets what it's about, and he's really protective of it. And the interesting thing that's happened is that as, I guess, the power of the major country labels has declined and dissipated, like every major label has, the Americana chart has just remained constant. So let's say you built a 2-story building in a little town, and the guy next door to you had a 10-story building, but then they came and said, you know, you got to knock 2 stories off. Now you got to knock 2 more off. All of a sudden, the building next door starts to look like it's getting higher because it's just consistent. So the Americana format has been very consistent, and in leveling the playing field by taking away, I guess, record shops, CD stores, because here's what would happen back in the day, which I wasn't aware of, but I heard this from distributors. But when a guy would walk in from distribution to the record store and he goes, "Hi, I'm your distributor from Polygram or Warner Brothers or whoever," and they go, "Great, man, what's up?" He goes, "I'm bringing you the records." "Okay, what do you got?" I got country records." "Okay, give me their country sells pretty good, man. Give me 100 of those." "I got rock records." "Oh, rock sells great. Give me 200 of those." "I got pop." Anyway, when he got down to Americana, he didn't care who it was or what it was. He goes, "I got a couple of, Americana doesn't sell. Give me one or two." So they couldn't get the plays. They couldn't get the rack space. They couldn't get the eyes on. Well, now that's changed because not so many eyes are on the big guys. There's no more record stores to sort of blindly ghettoize the format. And it's just like, really, that was an Americana record? Wow, that's really cool. They don't know. They're just, you just want an honest take. You just want somebody to be honest and say, "I really like your music. I don't like it because it's in a format. I just like it." And so that's what's happened to Americana, and it's pretty darn cool, and it's been a nice home for a lot of the real talent, I think, the person that has some gift that's a songwriter and this and that, and doesn't have a home because he doesn't wear a hat, or he's not pretty, or he's not fit a perfect format, or a manager or an attorney didn't get him a gig with a guy that runs a label who doesn't have a record collection. This is a great home for those people. And how far it grows from there and what happens, I think the sky's the limit, but the sky is not as blue and not as high as it used to be for the whole record business. So it just kind of is what it is.
Yeah. What do you have some artists out there that you are aware of that you feel like are some of the guiding lights of that movement at this point?
I don't watch the format so much. There are younger artists that have come along. I like Seth Walker. He's made 4 records already, and I don't know that he's Americana. Some other people that sort of slid out of the world. I mean, now you see Rodney Crowell at Americana. You see Emmylou at Americana. Dwight was at Americana. They're not getting chart action in country music anymore. So it's kind of gotten a mixture of there. I'd have to think about, Hayes Carl has had a lot of impact, a young songwriter out of Texas. I don't follow it too much. Once I committed to being Pete Anderson guitar player and concentrating on me as a guitar player, I've been really, really conscious of staying on my road. I mean, I might look at Adam's road and go, "Hey, Adam, how you doing?" But I'm not getting on your road for even 10 seconds. It's like, no, I'm going to just be the best Pete I can. And that requires my concentration on everything that I'm doing. And this as a musician and as a guitar player. There's all these intoxicating styles out there. I mean, Derek Trucks. Oh, man, wow, that's great. But I'm not going to spend any time trying to cop Derek's sound and try to play slide like him, because I can't do what he does. He probably can't do what I do. Robin Ford. We all love Robin Ford and the tone and the style. And, it's like, oh, Robin's great. I love Robin's play. But you're never going to be the best Robin Ford. You're never going to be the best B.B. King. So I said, you know what? I have certain techniques that are very unique to me, and I'm going to concentrate on those, and I'm going to expand on those. I'm going to expand on my thought of my tone, my right-hand technique, my concept, of harmony and jazz harmony and theory on the way I play, and blaze that trail as me, and raise my flag as high as theirs by doing that. And that seems to be working the best for me. It always has, but, I did it, from the shadows or from the, stage right when I was with Dwight. Now I'm in the center of the stage playing, guitars that I designed, through amps that I designed, that kind of thing, with slides that I designed, with, pickups that I designed, and I just got to really concentrate on being a great Pete Anderson. And it's not easy. It's not super difficult. It's just that you got to kind of slap yourself and go, quit looking. You're at the nude beach. It's like, quit staring. You got work to do. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Uh-huh. I know in the past when we've talked, and years ago, you talked to me about in your in your youth in Detroit area, right?
Yep.
You talked a lot about being influenced by Bob Dylan and jug bands.
Oh yeah, my first band was a jug band, literally without a jug. I mean, we had a wash tub and a washboard, but we didn't have a jug. But yeah, I came from the roots. I mean, my impetus to play, in doing a lot of interviews and talking, with people, and being asked this question over the years. The first knowledge I had of the guitar was Scotty Moore, but it was because I saw Elvis Presley on TV and he had such a big impact. And I saw the guitar, but the sound was Scotty, and I didn't realize it. And I have subsequently, deciphered it. It was Scotty Moore. And I do find it interesting that now I'm playing a guitar that looks kind of like the one Scotty played, and I'm sort of bridging, in my own way, blues and country and jazz, kind of what Scotty was doing. So I just find that interesting in a strange turn of events. Then, that said, I got into like singer-songwriter folk music, the early Dylan stuff, and blossomed out from there, like reading who wrote what songs, who played on what songs, and I started with an acoustic guitar and came really, when the kids my age were like infatuated with the Beatles and playing parties and doing that kind of stuff, I was playing, Mississippi John Hurt and Dylan tunes and folk stuff and Colonel Ray and Glover and Dave Von Ronk, and that was just the path I took,
Mm-hmm. And you told me that when you took the Dwight Yoakam gig, you really were coming from, in your eyes, you were more of a bluesy player at that time.
Yeah, I had played a lot of blues and switched over to playing country in the mid-'70s and started learning how to play country, but I didn't have a pathway, and I hadn't studied music yet when I first started, so it was kind of difficult for me. And I looked at James Burton's playing because Burton was kind of, I could grasp he had a blues pentatonic approach with chicken picking to country music, sort of like, what you would get off a Howlin' Wolf record, like that Hubert Sumlin would do. In a strange way, they two were sort of similar to me. And I because I played so much blues, I wasn't adept at major key playing. The 5-chord was always dominant. It wasn't a major 5. Like in country music, there's a lot of progressions. The term progression means 1 to 5 to 4 to 1. And in blues, it's retrogressions, right? So it's 1 to 4, which the 4 means nothing, and the 5 is dominant, and in reality the 5 means nothing. That's why you sit on a minor pentatonic in the key of G and just work it over and dismiss the changes. You can't do that in country. You're going to run into the major third, you're going to run in, the dominant 7s. Those things aren't going to work unless it's kind of, a funky country song, but there's a lot of major scale stuff. So I really had to switch over my thinking and work it that way. Now, by the time I started playing with Dwight and we made the record, I was adept at, chicken picking and, kind of that style of playing and playing, a lot of steel licks and a lot of major sounding stuff, and I'd created a style for myself. But I think the one thing that I had over the majority of guys at that time was such a strong blues background that I could sneak it in on the Dwight record. So it was like, if I'm playing on the record, I'll do this stuff, and it's like, okay, I'm taking an approach that's not, dissimilar to what a lot of guys that played a lot of country music would do. But I played a lot of real blues, not a country guy playing blues in a bar like one song. I played a lot of real blues. And I would sneak in, Freddie King licks, B.B. King licks, and things of that nature because I could and because it was different than what everybody else was doing. And I would see an opportunity to do it, and I'd be like, man, I can, I'll just throw this, like, I'll rip off Hideaway, I'll rip off, B.B. King, and I'll put this lick right. There's a blatant B.B. King riff in Little Sister that I just a complete rip of a B.B. lick, and then there's a bunch of like sixths, but like more like Hideaway sixths in Little Sister and Please Please Baby and things of that nature. So it was it's part of having all those colors on your palette that you can draw from.
Mm-hmm. And so now with the stuff that you're doing with like Birds Above Guitarland and all that, as you say, you've taken those things and you've even added a touch of jazzy stuff to it.
Yeah, the chords have expanded out from triads to tetrachords. So once after the 1, the 3, and the 5, once you add a flat 5, a major 6, sometimes a major 7, but those basically the flat 5 and the 6. Once those get in there, it just changes everything. So if I set you up with a flat 5-13, or I set you up with a major 6 or something like that, or a dominant 9 or a diminished 9, I now have established a tone in your ear as a listener. And if I go there within any kind of a lick or phrasing, it's not so shocking. And so that combined with what my right-hand technique is, because I completely dropped using the pick, and I'm using not a hybrid picking technique, but I'm just using all my fingers, it created kind of a more of a piano sort of, I'm pulling at any given time 5 notes with my right hand. And that means I can choose 5 different notes or whatever I want to do with it and create kind of sonic palettes with it,
Uh-huh. And then with these albums, and as you said, you've designed your own guitars, you've got signature model guitars, and I remember from being at the Little Dog Studios in Burbank in the past, you had that room with climate-controlled room with just an unbelievable collection of classic guitars, right?
Yep.
Tone is very important to you.
Yeah. I mean, some of that got downsized when I moved to the house. I mean, a lot of the stuff was, I had a lot of good stuff, but I only played instruments that were, I've got 3 instruments that are sort of part of my family, as I would say, that I would give to my daughter, or, in my inheritance. But that said, I had a lot of really nice instruments, but some of them got replaced with better instruments. I had a vintage 335 that I replaced with a 335 that I got from Gibson that was a better guitar. It's just a better guitar. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm about playing better guitars. And I sold that old one. I downsized a lot of that stuff because you had to have 2 of everything when I toured with Dwight. At the level we were touring at, I couldn't afford to break a string on anything in the middle of a show or have anything happen. I mean, I had 2 amplifiers. It was kind of like NASCAR. If the amp went down in the middle of the show, there was one sitting there with 2 plugs that went click, click, plug. Okay, you're on. I mean, literally, I'd be down for like 4 seconds. Not that this happened, but you had to be prepared for all that stuff. And so I did have a lot of gear. I mean, and now with the advent of me having signature instruments, it's like I got guitars coming out my eyeballs. So I sort of like pared down my world to bring everything to the house, kept the most valuable instruments. And the instruments, if I pulled out all my instruments today and you and I were here, except for the 3 vintage ones that I still have that are family, everything I have is more of a tool. It's like, this is a 6-string bass with flat wounds. This is an octave mandolin. This is a 12-string. This is a banjo. This is an acoustic that does this. This is something that does that. They're really all tools. They all have a purpose. So when I'm playing or producing something, I can go and grab the instrument that I need, and it'll work for the job that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. When you were going out and playing shows with this most recent music, what were you bringing with you then?
My main guitar, I'm not sure if you've seen it yet or not, but it's made by Reverend. It's called the PA1, and it's a laminated archtop F-hole Bigsby P90s. I actually, because Seymour's a pal of mine, it comes with P90s, and I've done different things, and because my music has gotten a little bit more sophisticated and I wanted a cleaner sound, I went to humbuckers. But what Seymour made for me was a humbucker in a P90 frame with rails instead of pole pieces. So I didn't have an issue with string spacing. And I just really love the pickups. They're great, great, great pickups. I have a real Bigsby on it, and that I play for the majority of the show. I'm playing a little bit of slide, and I've got what looks exactly like a Telecaster, but it's called an Eastsider made by Reverend. It's got a multi-radius fingerboard. It's got some cavities up in the front of the guitar. shaved heel, kind of like an Anderson, and it's I have one of those with really, really high flat wound strings that I use, and I use a really great capo that converts your guitar. It keeps your action high. Let me put it that way. Jim Dunlop invented this capo, and it's unique because it's got a little bar in it that slides right over your fret and kind of elevates your strings just slightly enough that you don't get any fret rattle when you play slide. And so I use that for slide, and I've gotten rock slides. The guy, Danny Songhurst at Rock Slides, took the company over from his uncle who passed away, and he makes these incredible slides. And his uncle invented the slide with a little divot in it for your finger to rest and a little half moon cut out of it for it to sit over your finger. And it's just brilliant, and they're really comfortable. And I told him he needed to make some glass ones, because I never played glass slides, and then I started switching over, and I found out they were actually warmer. And so he makes a glass slide. He makes all kinds of slides, but the glass slide is what I'm using by Rock Slides. And then the other guitar is an East Sider. It's just a regular telly. It's a Sunburst telly with binding that I have, and I use that in the show too. So I'll play telly style, sometimes with a capo like Albert Collins style, or just without a capo, kind of my hybrid style. I'll play the PA1 with the Bigsby, and then I'll play slide on the heavy flat wound string type telly looking thing. And that's what I take on the road pretty much. And I play harmonica too. I'm playing a little bit of harmonica in the show.
Mm-hmm. What kind of strings are you using these days?
Oh man, I'm tuned down a whole step. So when you play an E natural on my guitar, it's a D. And Kevin, what's the string gauge on the PA1? Is it 11? 11.5. Is it 18 did you go to? 11.5, 14, 18, 30, 34, 44, 54. Diodario strings. It's
an unwound third, right?
Yep. The biggest unwound third I can get, but it's unwound third. Pretty heavy, but I'm tuned down a whole step. But they're big, they got some girth to them, and I've noticed that I'm playing a lot more percussive piano-like playing than string bending. I do string bending on the East Sider, which looks like a telly, but it's much more percussive kind of piano style of playing with little inversions and things that I'm doing as far as harmony with the chords, and some more chordal stuff. I've gotten kind of bored with linear playing for myself, and linear legato playing. I don't know. I've heard a lot of it, and it's just like I'm kind of moving away from it. I don't know. It's not what inspires me as much as what I'm doing now.
When you say linear playing, what do you mean by that?
Scale, style, high sustain, what almost everybody does, what every guitar player does and has done for years. It's single note playing, kind of. I listen to a lot of Wes Montgomery. I don't try to play like Wes, but I try to absorb Wes. And Wes would always have, he'd have intervals and some other things going on, when he played. It wasn't all just like da 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 da. It was more like, there'd be one or two or three notes, or he'd be using chords to intersperse with his scale playing, or not really scale playing, but riffing, I've been concentrating a lot more on phrasing, how do I phrase things, and I've come to find out, like, phrasing is almost everything when you really study it. And I've told a lot of people, there's three elements that we have in playing guitar. I call it the 3 T's: tone, time, and taste. And that said, I could teach anybody pretty quickly how to tune their guitar and play Dust My Broom by Elmore James. but I could never, ever, ever, including myself, teach them or teach myself to play it just like Elmer James, because what he brought to it was his sense of time, how he played the strings, which is tone, and what he had to say was taste. So tone is in your ears and then in your hands. You know, how you, however hard you pull the strings or pluck the strings or whatever you do them is how you shape your sound, and that comes from what's pleasing in your ear. And then time is, you know, one of the kings of time is Albert King, because he could put the note on the backside. He could wait the exact amount of time before he played the note. So that's an extreme example of great time. And then taste is what you have to say. It's like, what 3-5 notes, what did you just do and say with these things that you have available to you? So I think that's really what I'm trying to concentrate on, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are you working on? Well, you're probably always working on new music, right?
I'm always, yeah. You know, the record got done. We went on the road, so I was like, the last thing I was thinking about then was like writing or doing anything new, because it was a trek to make the record. And once the record's done and I start doing shows, I'm concentrating on getting up to speed. In other words, I want to be as good as the record, and then I'm not trying to exceed the record, but, you know, you'll take a song and you'll play it enough, and then it'll start to morph a little bit because you're playing it live and you're having fun and you're doing some different things with it. And I wanted to get the songs on Birds Above Guitarland, which I play all the songs off that album when I play, and I wanted to get those songs up to speed that I owned all those songs live. I played them on the record, you know, but that's a studio environment. That's like making a movie, and then I decided to do a play. And when you go out to do a play, it's live, and things happen, and there's interchange. And, you know, I wanted to get to the point where myself and the band owned those songs so that I could kind of have fun within the framework of each individual song. So right now I've sort of started just fumbling around with stuff. I'm always trying to write instrumentals. I love instrumentals, and they're really, really, in my case, difficult to write because they have to be meaningful, melodic heads and statements and somewhat creative, you know, chord changes, and that's not easy.
Mm-hmm. When you were going out on the road, and when you say own these songs, did you stretch out on the songs? You improvised over these live?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So that it's like, you know, I could play them just like the record, but you know, you have to take into consideration, you know, now you're putting on a show, and you know, you had a short intro, and maybe you want to play, you know, 2 choruses of a solo on the front of this song, and then, you know, there's little places within the song that can expand. I try to keep the framework of, you know, respectful to the basic chord structure of the song when I'm singing and playing, but there's plenty of room for improvisation in whatever I write to a degree. You know, there's always going to be a solo that's open to interpretation, but the chord structure I try to keep, you know, obviously locked down into its original form, because that's what the song is. That's what we recognize as the song. But other than that, yeah, I just try to get to where I can improvise and you know, be spontaneous and amuse myself.
So I know that a few years ago you teamed up with Guitar Center and created all the backing tracks for the King of the Blues competition. I don't know if you're still involved with that.
Well, they stopped doing it. I did every one of them that I know about, but a couple of years ago they did it. The first year we were in Chicago at the House of Blues, it was great. B.B. King played. We had a great time. And then the next 2 years or something, they were in Los Angeles. Then they stopped it for a year. Then they started it again. I was in the house band. I created the backing tracks, and I was one of the judges. And so we did that. I think we either did 5 or 6 of them, but they stopped doing it. And
I see. There were some awesome backing tracks that you laid down there, man. Those were really cool instrumental backing tracks.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And you know, that's one thing I want to do is I sort of like, that's kind of a cool track. I have those in the back of my mind to like grab and take and you know, maybe turn them into songs, you know, turn them into instrumentals or something. So
right.
I have that. Also, one thing, whether we get to it or not, but I wanted to mention that really the next project that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a new guitar instructional DVD.
Okay.
And in doing that, I'm going to tour behind clinics. So I'd like to do a 40-city tour over the course of so many months with a raffle at the end of it where I give away a guitar and an amp and a this and a that to the people that come to it. But the next real project that I'm going to do is going to be a brand new, how to play guitar like I'm playing right now, and then take it on the road and do clinics everywhere, and then gigs, in appropriate cities.
Right.
That's really the next big plan for me. But in doing that, when you brought up the Guitar Center tracks, it made me think of that, because I'm going to use those tracks, pare them down, and then have them whatever, if there's 3 or 5 or whatever that I play to demonstrate what I'm talking about, so that I can use those in the clinics and then use them for sale in the package of the whole thing to say, here's some tracks to play to, and here's how I would play to them, and here's on this one we're going to work on pentatonic, on this one we're going to work on flat 5, substitution chords, things like that.
Right. So part of the reason I brought that up was because I was wondering, when you were practicing to go out with Birds Above Guitarland, would you sit at home and practice over the tracks yourself?
The backing tracks from the Guitar Center?
No, not those.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Guitarland tracks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would. Because it's always I would refresh myself to what melodic or what motif approach did I take on the solo on this, and then how did I sing that, and what melody did I get, because it starts to fluctuate as you move away from it. So yeah, a lot, yeah. Really try to stay close to the record, return yourself back to the motherland. Yeah.
Well, I would love to hear some more backing tracks and promote them for you. And if you're going to do the clinic tour, that'd be awesome.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be reaching out to all my pals and do that. I'm also, I don't know if we ever talked about this, but I'm slowly in the process of writing. I guess it would be a DVD and a booklet of sorts, but how to produce a record. Now, there's record production courses, and there's a lot of information on that, but everyone that I've looked at teaches record production from the engineer perspective.
Right.
So if you and I were going to guitar school together, right, and we were walking down the hall of the guitar school, and we saw a bulletin that's going, we're going to start a production class. I go, hey, Adam, check this out. How to produce records, man. And we're both guitar players, right? And we all we want to do is play guitar, write our music, and do what we do. And we see this bulletin and say, do you want to do this class? I go, yeah, it'd be great. We go into the class, we sign up. The first day of the class, we sit down, and the guy goes, okay, we're going to talk about signal flow and electronics. It'd be like, got to go. I have no interest in electronics, signal flow, phase, plugging in microphones, limiters, and compressors, because there's people that do that. And the digital world has made it even easier for you to do that. But how do I organize, psychologically prepare to make a record with somebody? How do I win them over? How do I win their trust? How do I use all my skills to, convince somebody that I'm the right person to have a sounding board to work off of? How do I communicate with the musicians? How much of an arranger am I? A co-writer? So I would be coming at it as a musician producer. There's 3 types of producers. There's engineer producer, musician producer, and then a musicologist. Like John Hammond Sr. was a musicologist. So he had studied records. He didn't play, and he wasn't an engineer, but he certainly had a lot of great taste. And so he could go in and say, you know what I like this, I like that, reference records for you, because he had a great record collection. Well, the majority of, I think, producers that I follow and that I am is a musician producer. So I bring my musical skills into the studio and work it from that perspective. So I'm putting together something that I don't think has been done yet. Mm-hmm. Is how to produce a record from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So
and getting into topics like arrangement and voicing and all of that.
Everything, yeah. But in everything about it, how to organize the arrangements, the rehearsals. I have a section called coffee table arranging, where you sit with the artist and you go over it. How to make sure, how to work psychologically with, if you're working with a band or a single artist, how to get your messages across. You know, when they're auditioning you to be your producer, you should be auditioning them to see if you want to really produce them. Where are the pitfalls? You know, what's going to be a problem with this artist? What do you have to overcome to make the record and win their trust? But then, you know, basics. You know, what am I accomplishing on the first day of recording? You know, how do I get the artist comfortable to sing? You know, when am I doing each segment of the recording? How do I mix the record? You know, from a perspective of, you know, panning and what I want. How do I want to communicate to the engineer? It's pretty. It would be all inclusive and fairly intense as far
right.
as how many chapters it would be.
Right.
Probably be 10 or 12 chapters easily.
Uh-huh. Wow. Sounds like something I would be very interested in.
I think anybody that plays guitar and writes songs, and especially now because everything's going to home recording.
Right.
And it's getting really good. You know, you can do really good at home. And I can't imagine anybody, unless they've experienced what I've experienced, that would read this and not pick up quite a few really cool tricks on how to make their records better or how to produce records better for other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so how far along are you with that?
I wrote the preface, which is just like the introduction, like, hi, I'm Pete Anderson, D-D-D-D-D. You know, I sort of did my explanation of here's what, you know, I'd like to explain to everybody, you know, that the name of a producer is a misnomer. I try to explain it from the film world because people understand how films are made. So a producer is more like a director of a film, and I kind of give my description of what a producer is, you know, what he's responsible for, and I do it. And I align it with film. So in other words, studio would be location, actors would be the musicians, script would be the songs, engineer would be the director of photography, you know, and that's how it works. And that the producer of the record is really directing everybody, and like a director of a film, and he's responsible, or I am responsible for every note that everyone plays on everything. Every note. I have to hear every bass note, every kick drum note, every note that everyone plays. I'm responsible. Right. And I'm the liaison who interprets. The director gets the best performance from his artists, actors. I get the best performance from my musicians and star, or whoever, you know, the client is.
Right. I think that's a great analogy that people will really be able to understand.
Yeah, and that's where I've started. It's quite, you know, it'd be a couple pages to get through that part. I'm loosely trying to get somebody, you know, somebody really good that would want to be the editor, you know, because I just kind of spew that stuff out there on tape and then transcribe it and then go, well, let's make this legible, you know, how would this read top to bottom if a pro editor wrote, you know, edited it, you know what I mean?
Right.
That kind of stuff. Andy Ellis is a friend of mine. I got, like you, Andy Ellis, and Dan Ford. I've been very lucky to find three really good writers, you know, that are also musicians, but I've sort of been able to follow your careers as writers and you know, get better and better at what you guys do, you know, when I read your writing from day one to, you know, like yesterday. So I talked to Andy, and he's, like, doing a ton of editing. So he's working for, what is he working for? Oh, he's working for Premier Guitar.
Oh, okay.
So he takes all the articles and everybody, and he goes, okay, I'll make this legible, you know, and make it readable and right.
Right.
Just kind of want to get everything down and then turn it into a legible format, chapter by chapter. And then I might take it over to MI, Musicians Institute, or somewhere like that, and prop it up as a seminar and sort of teach it, you know, as a curriculum.
Right.
Because I'd love to sell it as a curriculum to music schools. And then go around the country, and then I could do producer seminars, you know. I could do guitar seminars, producer seminars, and play a gig. Right, yeah. And that would just about make it break even for me. You know, I'd probably everyone could have their own room in my band by then.
Yeah. I hear you.
That's sort of the plan.
Well, I'd be very interested in helping you with that if you decide to do that.
Well, I could at some point, maybe over the next 2 or 3 days, I will email you what I've written.
Okay.
You could read it and give me your thoughts on it. It's just like it's not a ramble. It's got order to it. It's not too horrible, but it's just been transcribed at this point.
Yeah. Cool.
Take a look at it and see what you think. Yeah, that'd be cool.
All right.
What we should do is write a book. We really should.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about writing a book, but I mean,
I found out a lot about that writing music instructional book stuff, and I'd like to talk to you about that. I wrote a lot of books for Hal Leonard, and I did some self-published stuff. The self-published stuff I made a lot more money at,
right.
but then again, I don't have them, distributing it. So, and I got to a point where I kind of just backed off on that. But I would love to discuss all of those things with you. I actually have to go coach a baseball game.
Good for you.
Yeah, my son is 13.
Awesome.
And got a baseball game tonight.
Where does he play? What position?
He pitches and shortstop or second, depending on if we're on 80-foot or 90-foot bases.
That's awesome. I love baseball. All right, well, go play some ball.
Yeah.
And I will email you this writing, and then I'll try to stay in touch, and I'll get this off to you in the next day or two, or this afternoon. I can dig it out.
Okay, and it's adam@guitar.com.
Yeah, I just got. Did you email me that you were going to be late on this phone call from that address?
Well, yeah, I did. I mean, I was addressing it to Kevin, but you probably got it, right?
I saw it, so I know where to email you.
Yeah.
All right,
and then,
great talking to you.
Send me your mailing address. I'll send you a copy of the most recent book I wrote.
I will. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, buddy. Have fun.
Yeah, take care,
Bye.
Pete. Nice talking to you. Bye.